Hello, everyone. We are here with Graham Schneider. Snyder, is it Snyder or Schneider?
Yeah, Snyder. Yeah,
Snyder. And Graham was here last month talking about horary. Graham is a geomancer and he does a lot of divination of a different sorts. And today he wanted to talk about people being incarcerated for the act of fortune telling. Is that true?
yeah, yeah. I generally describe myself as an astrologer, but yeah, I do geomancy too.
Uh-huh. So okay, so tell us, how, do people really go to jail for fortune telling?
In the past, people have. It used to be. I've been kind of doing a deep dive on historically, like what's happened with all different kinds of fortune telling, which astrology definitely, at least historically, has also been included in. And there was a thing in England called the Vagrancy Act. Of 1824 that got updated over and over again. It used to be kind of a formality. It was kind of like the police really didn't usually tend to bother people for it unless they kind of someone was kind of being a public nuisance or but there were a lot of kind of like high profile cases where people were kind of made an example of, and that's usually when astrologers would get roped in. It's usually um, yeah, it's one of these things that it didn't used to come up very often, and oftentimes it was kind of more of a nuisance than a real problem. But there were occasions where like astrologers were sentenced to jail time, hard labor. Um, yeah.
Do you think it? And hi, Kazri. By the way, sorry we were late. I was at a Kepler. I was doing a Kepler interview until 4, so that's why we're late. Um, but Kazri, if you have any questions or comments on this topic, feel free to interject. I don't know a lot about the topic. Does it? I mean, I guess one thing I would ask is, does it depend on the quality of the fortune telling?
No, it's so it tends to be very much, well, especially in England, it used to be like a class thing, of like um, when people who were doing fortune telling got to have a bit of a reputation, and like high profile people in society were going to them, and people were making more money. That tended to be when the courts would notice, and religious authorities would get involved. And so one of the more high profile cases was Alan Leo, who some people see call the father of modern astrology, doing like psychological readings. He was pulled into court twice. The first case in 1914 was rejected, but he later was pulled in again in 1917, and he only had to pay like a nominal fine, but it really kind of changed his outlook on like what types of things. He basically went back and rewrote a lot of his books, saying like we need to take anything to do with definite prediction out of astrology and like change the way we do. Like if we're gonna get locked, if we're gonna get pulled into court, we can't be seen to be predicting, especially predicting death, which was the thing that I think seems like non people not in this world in astrology circles or whatever were pretty big on. That was kind of like the big bugbear. It's like, oh, you're prognosticating someone's death.
So that's what they got in trouble for, was predicting death.
Yeah, I think so. But also, it seems like it's also just generally, um, a way to kind of uh keep certain elements of society down. Like they're, in America. So, for instance, in New York, there's another famous astrologer, Evangeline Adams, who also went to trial three times for doing fortune telling. And she, at that point, she was like extremely prominent in, she'd worked with uh, many people in the astrological world, and was like a correspondence course and all this stuff that was helping predict like stock market things. And yeah, she got pulled in three times in 1911, 1914, and I think 1923. And she always got off with like a nominal charge. I think yeah, she kind of just saw it as like a business expense. Like, okay, that's just what they're going to do. But a lot of places on the East Coast, like New York, have kind of this Puritan history where like the laws were formed in such a way where the religious authorities really didn't like people talking about the future. which is silly because we're Americans. We have the First Amendment right to say what we want, but um, especially these days, that doesn't seem to be comforted very much.
Well, it makes me think of, okay, so Vedius Fallon's he makes that oath in book 6, and if you just look at the oath, neutrally, you think, oh, he's just protecting all the books, but if you really look at it, he's about to release the length of life calculation, and
Mm.
he says, may this work be protected, from the uninitiated, and and only the initiated are actually supposed to have access to the length of life calculation. So what would you think about that idea that it's like a secret, it's like secret hermetic arts or something?
Absolutely. I think it's one of these funny things. I think especially within the astrology community or within the wider community of people doing divination and fortune telling, I kind of think like the discrepancy between those two words is mostly just like a class signifier. People doing divination are doing fortune telling. It's just like the kind of brand. It's a branding thing. It's like, oh, like but yeah, I think there's definitely discussions to be had about ethics in within like astrological communities and things. But I think the broader question is like, okay, when is like the wider society going to like crack down on different types of things that we do as a business, but also like as an art, like because all those nuances kind of go out the window when people who are not in this world kind of like come into it and be like, oh, that's what you guys do, and it's like, no, no, no. Usually it's wildly inaccurate. It's like the Satanic Panic, in the '80s, like um, you talk to anyone who's actually doing real things in terms of like divination, and it's like it's not about Satan or any of the other. It's like yeah, it's complete misnomer. And there could be like these kind of like panics that just happen. It's
What is this? What was satanic panic?
oh, it was in the '80s. I think a lot of people on the Christian right got really upset about like death metal records and Dungeons and Dragons, and I don't know. I wasn't really around for it, but but it seems like there were quite a few trials at the time that were like like censorship of like music and things that um,
Well,
yeah,
I
went
feel like
on.
there's like a double-edged sword to things, because it's like I do feel like there is amount of, okay, I actually feel a little bit controlling of astrologers and their predictions. I mean, with remediation, because they like, part of the reason I wrote that book is because I kept hearing people make these scary predictions. And I'm like, that's actually an error. Predicting mean futures creates in the minds of mankind a mean future, right? So it's like there is this idea that there could be some regulation of futuring, like
It could be kind of a curse, right? Like, yeah,
yeah.
yeah. I
So how
think
much
you're
do you
right.
think future telling should be regulated?
Oh, I don't know. I, I don't know how you really could regulate it like on like a legal level. It used to be that astrologers and fortune tellers used to have to say for entertainment purposes only, like you had to have these like legal disclaimers. And yeah, I don't know, but I don't know. I mean, it's a hard thing to say. Like what really I think the thing that's kind of so politically evocative about divination and astrology is that it is sort of ungovernable. It's like you can make a prediction and no one can really regulate it. It's like uh, it's like getting rogue stock tips or something. It's like how would people know? So
Well,
like for
go ahead.
yeah, go ahead.
No, you go.
Well, just to say, so the period of astrology I'm kind of most interested in historically is the English Civil War, so like the mid 1640s and 50s, and at that time, uh, a lot of astrological knowledge had just been translated into English, and people were using it for all sorts of things. They were doing it to like plan their battles against the king, and all sorts of things, predicting, oh, such and such person is gonna die, all this stuff, and it was this like politically very uh, it was ever present. It was like one of these things that was like it was just kind of in the culture. Like everyone was kind of thinking about like, well, how do we, who's kind of like aligned with the stars? And of course, at that time, you had this kind of Puritan kind of these kind of battles going on. So a lot of people were thinking like, okay, like who's kind of like whose side is God on or whatever, that kind of thing. Um, but I think the thing is that like unlike a lot of other domains of knowledge, like astrology and divination are they're sort of inherently like outside of like orders of power. Like I mean, unless you go very far back to like Mesopotamian times, like astrology for the most part is a very individual thing. It's very like person to person.
Well, what do you
How do you
think
feel?
about the idea that churches try to regulate it by saying, don't do false divin or false
Yeah.
prophecy. They call it false prophecy, is what they call it.
Oh yeah. Well, I think it's I think churches definitely have always wanted a monopoly on people's souls and like how people saw their fortunes going. It's like especially the medieval church had kind of a monopoly on like telling people like, oh, this is how fate works and this is how God thinks your life is going to go. And we don't think that way anymore, though. It's kind of like we live in a more secular age where like we're kind of open to the marketplace of ideas in terms of like what people want to engage with. And I think a lot of that started with when astrology came into like the Anglosphere, like the English speaking world. Like it kind of came up with the rise of like modern capitalism. So I think there's kind of like an interesting kind of dynamic going on there where it's like culture became more favorable to astrology as it became more favorable to like a diversity of authority in terms of the realm of ideas.
Hmm. If you have any questions for Graham about astrologers being imprisoned for fortune telling, please put them in the chat. Okay, so I think one way to look at it is like the church is trying to control people for the money. I also do think churches heal people from things like, okay, it'd be like getting a bad tattoo and then having to get a tattoo cover up. It's like, so you went to an astrologer and they gave you a mean prediction. Well, the church is doing like a cover up or fix of that by saying that's false prophecy. Like I do think that the church is fixing. I mean, a lot of astrologers give really mean predictions, and I don't know
Sure.
that they should be in jail for that, but I do think that is an error.
Yeah, I think there could be bad actors out there. Yeah, I guess from my perspective, I feel like both the church and the state are kind of like blend instruments in terms of like coming down on people for speech.
Mm.
um, but yeah, I could see, uh, yeah, I do think we as astrologers kind of need to like kind of like control ourselves and our own kind of output so it's not like doing real damage to people. Um,
Mm.
uh,
I mean, so you think for you it comes down to like a free speech kind of ethos?
well, I think so. I mean, uh, oh, in what sense? Like, what do you mean?
Well, I mean, so I guess imprisoning astrologers for doing death predictions. That's like kind of like imprisoning somebody for speaking out against the government. Well, it's not the same. I mean, do doctors get imprisoned for giving prognosis of death?
Oh, I mean, there's definitely like medical malpractice. That's usually more about like when surgery goes wrong or something. Uh, I mean, you can kind of take someone to court for anything. It's whether we can win the case or not. Yeah, I don't know. I was trying to look up like modern cases. So apparently, it seems like in the divination world, really right now, the thing that's on people's radars is tarot. Like that's like the thing that like there are still several states where it's like officially, at least on the books, like card reading is illegal. Just uh, across the board, which is surprising. That probably isn't enforced very much, but like especially in places like Utah or like several places on the East Coast. I think Maryland still has anti-card reading laws. And again, I'm not an expert on that, but I just it's one of these things of like I think I tend to think free speech is a good thing. That's kind of like one of the good things about one of the few still good things about being in America right now is like, okay, we at least got free speech as far as it goes.
So Laurel, you know Laurel, right, from Constellation Circle.
Oh
Um,
yeah, mhm.
she's saying it's interesting though because that presumes the church is the ultimate authority and is in the right, although there wasn't due process. So I mean, what is due process? I mean, I guess I mean I
Oh,
should.
that's yeah, that's a legal term. That's just that's about like uh uh like when you go to when you're taken to court, you have certain rights as a citizen, to be tried by a jury, those kind of things. Yeah, I don't know, I don't really know much about the church. I'm sorry, I just noticed the chat here. I was in the wrong tab and now I see the chat.
Oh, okay, yeah. Yeah, Laurel's asking, how would you prove either a church or a fortune teller is the good guy? I mean, that's a good question.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's yeah, who knows? Yeah, I think I would tend to believe the astrologer more than a priest, but but I don't know. I don't know.
I mean, I think
Um,
it could depend on the case. I mean, just like there could be bad actors in astrology, there could be bad actors in the church, right? And it's like it's probably on a case by case basis. What is the
yeah.
chart that's being looked at? What's the age? Like, if I told a 10-year-old I did their chart reading and I said you're going to die next year in their chart reading, that would be wrong.
Oh, completely. Yeah, I think especially working with kids, I think you have to be extremely careful to like be. That's one of those things. I think I read a lot of like William Lilly, and he talks about he is a 17th century astrologer. And the thing he kind of focuses on a lot is that you really need in his language, you need to kind of like uh, be like a strive to be a good person and read for all and do uh, you know he would call those like Christian values because he was writing in the 1640s. I would say at this point we need to be a responsible practitioner. Like um, yeah. I think astrology is one of those things where it's like it's sort of the thing itself is kind of value neutral. It's the intention you bring to it that really shines through. So I think for most of us, like as astrologers, like we really want to like improve our clients' lives. So we want, or give them maybe insight into better choices they could make, or potentialities around the corner that but yeah, the general bent of things is like positive. But you could definitely imagine cases like historically, especially where like that wasn't necessarily the case, or just neutral. It could be something where it's like someone's doing divination for themselves, and it's like, you couldn't really, ascribe like a good or bad intention to it. It's just like it's trying to gain information. Um,
Well, it's funny because we always think of these things as historical, right? Like historically, astrologers have been persecuted, or the witches were persecuted at the Salem witch trials, or things like that. Although, as a modern astrologer, I do actually feel this fear, especially when I talk about medical astrology. I was just, with Kepler like 5 minutes, half an hour ago, talking about medical cases, and it's like I'm not a doctor, but I'm a medical astrologer extremist, which I don't. I'm almost like a
I know
medical
you are.
activist, right? You know what I'm saying? Where I'm like looking at how astrology can heal cases that maybe doctors can't, and I do worry about being persecuted for such a thing.
Yeah, it's one of those things. When I first started with astrology, I kind of shied away from doing medical. There was a course I could have taken that was in it that but thinking about it now, it's like I think especially with like the American medical system, like I think astrology has a lot to offer in terms of like diagnosis, like especially when people can't get in front of a doctor because of their HMO or whatever, um, insurance things, or you have to see your primary care physician before you can go see a specialist. Sometimes if someone can get like an early warning about something, like hey, there's this transit that affects, well, maybe something like with your knee is going to happen, or maybe look out, be safe next week or something. Like I think things like that. With a skilled practitioner, that's always the caveat. Is like I don't do medical predictions because I haven't studied that. But for someone who has, I think um, there can be real value from getting a medical reading from an astrologer. The question is, for the outside world, like how much weight I think for the astrologer, the main thing is like how much weight does your client give to that? Um, I would never like, for instance, like if someone has like a pre-existing diagnosis from a doctor, I would never contradict that. Um, but yeah, it's hard to say. I think the thing that I worry about more is like, uh, to what extent is like outside pressure, like the Alan Leo case where like he got taken to court and he he wanted to go back and like rewrite all his books. It's like at one point is the outside world affecting like the way that we as practitioners like want to practice our art, like um yeah, I think that's like an open question.
Well, and I think it's always that dance between like the control feature of people being biased against astrology, like Laurel's bringing up, of we don't want to be controlled through bias and not allowed to do our work and our research, right? And
Yeah,
though I do think we do want to train astrologers to be good and fair fortune tellers. I think it's like a dance, right? Of sanctions exist for a reason, or if someone is really breaking the law by doing bad, in any field, whether it be medicine or astrology or anything, then there could be recourse for that, right? Like there are doctors who are found guilty of killing patients and things like that. Now, most astrologers aren't doing that, right? Most of us are
yeah.
innocently trying to be magical. No, I don't
I
know
think
what.
if someone had cause to go hurt someone else, they wouldn't astrology wouldn't be the first thing they would go to accomplish that. It's like it's not that's not really what we're doing. That's not what we're here for.
Like
But
predicting someone's death does not kill them. It might kill
oh,
their
that's true.
spirit a little
Yeah.
bit, but it doesn't actually kill their body. But yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. It's can I bring in a quote? I was just looking at the Wikipedia article on Alan Leo, and there's this thing James Holden writes about him that he says is really short. He says, um, uh, talking about the turning point he made after his first court case, he said, thereafter, what has been more recently called event-oriented astrology gradually receded in favor of character analysis and vague descriptions of possible areas of psychological harmony or stress. So the idea is that like uh, and because Alan Lee was so influential, like people kind of stopped doing prediction for a long time. It seems like not everyone and not completely, but there did seem to be like a definite shift away from doing that kind of, especially like horror based astrology. Later in his life, Alan Leo said, "Oh, I never learned horror. I don't know about that." But you look at his early writings, and based on Kim Farnell's book, you look at his early writings, and he's quoting things from books about horror. So there, I think there's ways to where it's like, um, yeah, it's kind of incredible that like the whole course of like 20th century astrology kind of shifted because why? Because like some capricious judge wanted to make an example of a prominent astrologer. Like it seems kind of
Yeah.
really horrible.
Well, there it could be judges that are biased against astrology. Maybe it's like
Yeah.
show us on the doll where an astrologer hurt you. You know what I mean? It's like I don't know, like
Right.
astrologer hurt,
Yeah.
but Laurel's saying that the medical field considers himself the ultimate authority and have legal clout, and there's big money in the medical business. I mean, this is where we get into
Yeah.
money in politics of like there's huge insurance payouts and things like that, and it's like the astrologers come in, fixing problems that the doctors can't fix, and in some ways they benefit from unfixable problems because they get to see the people over and over again. I mean, that's a thing
Certainly.
where it's like you really do have to be an activist to fight the man in any case, whether it be the medical man or you know um kind of thing. I mean, I'm sure there have been activist astrologers throughout the world. Like, was Alan Leo, was
I don't think so. He was involved in like the Theosophical movement, which was this kind of woolly like Victorian new age idea. But I think he was a generally kind of well-intentioned guy. I if you're thinking about like political astrology, I think I would go back earlier to like the people like Guido Bonatti or Theophilus of Edessa who were doing like actually working for patrons who were like, okay, help me like plan this battle. you know, like that kind of thing. I think that's also like kind of a function of like what kind of society are we living in? I think before modern times, most of our tradition of astrology, there's kind of like star lore all around the world in different ways, but like that Babylonian tradition through like the Hellenistic Alexandrian period, like that stuff was pretty much reserved for like kings and princes and people who, you know, the elite of the elite who could like exert power in that way. And I think it's only kind of with the printing press that like astrology becomes like democratized and we all get access to it. It's kind of like um, so I think at that point, like the the range of people who can do astrology changes, but also like there's also a shift in the kind of like what people are most interested. Most people just kind of want to know, oh, roughly like how's my life going to be going, or that kind of thing.
Mhm.
It becomes less about like big monumental shifts of forces and more about like the individual, I think.
Well, okay. Do you think astrologers should be, sanctioned for arranging marriages?
Oh no, I mean that seems like a pretty commonplace, like yeah, especially in Vedic astrology, it seems like that's a pretty routine uh service that the astrologer provides for their clients, is like setting the correct date for a wedding, or uh yeah, that no, I don't think there's any problem with that.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think some people have a problem with arranged marriages, or like,
Oh, arranging, like who should marry who.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
picking who should marry who.
Oh,
If anyone's
yeah, I
watching
don't
and has
know.
an opinion, please include it in the chat. We would love to hear from you.
Yeah, I'd love to hear if anyone has insight on that. I don't know. I- yeah, that's not something that's really in my experience.
What if
Yeah,
somebody arranged a fight according to the charts, and they picked, because like we were talking about this with the Mars Uranus conjunction coming up in Gemini, and we're trying to think of an event that we could hold. We thought about debates, and we are like, well, maybe that's not rogue enough. And then we're like, what if we put people with really bad composite charts together with really bad synastry, and then had them debate? Like, would that be illegal? Should that be illegal?
no, I think it's great. Well, I think there's definitely like sports astrology. There's like which team is going to win the upcoming game. There's techniques you can use to like figure out pretty definitively, like based on their charts, like who's more likely to win. And that's I don't know. I think that's fascinating. That's like doesn't always work, but it's more than you would expect.
I'm trying to get you to I'm trying to find a nefarious use of astrology that you feel like someone should get in trouble for.
Oh gosh, I yeah. See, I don't know. Unless um yeah, I don't know. I don't know. I'm the wrong person to ask about it.
What about reading charts without someone's permission? Should people get in trouble for
Oh,
that?
completely. Yeah, I'm very clear with my clients, like especially like I'll read your chart and I'll read what your chart says about your partners or potential partners, but I'm not going to look at your partner's chart unless I've talked to them first or something. That's kind of my own personal kind of boundary with that. I think other people have different ideas about how to go about that, but I think you can usually find everything out you need from the client's chart. Not You don't really need to go outside of that. But yeah, I think yeah, that gets into murky territory where you can imagine like like an angry spouse coming to you and being like, "What did you say about me?" and blah blah blah. Like,
Yeah.
um, yeah, I don't know.
Catcher's
Have you come
asking.
across that? Oh,
Well, okay, so in ethics class, there's just a standard ethic of never looking at a chart without permission. And I look at, act utilitarianism, which is a philosophy that you make decisions for the greatest good of all concerned. So, yes, generally it's not correct to do that. At times, though, it is the most correct option. Like, here's an example. Like in act utilitarianism, like we know that it's never okay to shoot somebody ever. But if
right.
somebody's about to shoot 10 people, utilitarianism would say it's more ethical to shoot the person who's about to shoot 10 people than not
Yeah.
shoot them because you save 10 lives, right? Like, so it's like in the same vein. I mean, let's say there was a domestic violence abuser who was you know threatening somebody after she'd left them or he'd left them, and the domestic violence abuser flared up at times. Like, I think we should look at the domestic violence abuser's chart to see potential flares of anger to protect the victim. So like that's a
Yeah.
case where I believe looking without permission is the best right option.
Sure, I think there could definitely be cases. Loli in the chat just said something about, I think it always comes back to who has the power, the church, the medical field, and with arranged marriages, who the dominant culture, parents and males, and who is oppressed by that culture. Yeah, I think in that case, like an astrologer could come in on both sides. That could be, I could, yeah, I don't know. I see, but I see what you're saying, Andy, about like the yeah. I don't know. I even in that case, I haven't come across that where like there's like an abusive partner, but I could see. Um, I think, don't you think that partner would show up in that in their client's chart though? Do you see it that
Not,
way?
not. I mean, if I'm looking at a complex dermatome map with flaring of iron through the system, and it's like
Okay,
looking at this person's chart. And now I deal with the roguish cases, because I'm a remediation specialist. So like I deal with really
sure.
rogue cases, right? So like we're getting to like life or death considerations when I'm dealing with cases a lot of times, and it's like I do want to be sanctioned though, but like that's why I work with a team of people. It's like I'm not trying to be like a rogue scholar just doing whatever I want. It's like, I think it would be best, for example, if the astrologer worked with a team, like a law enforcement team, and this and that, and the astrologer was considered, right? Like, so it's like I don't necessarily know that astrologers should just be rogue scholars doing these whatever they want on their own. I think, I don't know what Alan Leo was doing. I don't know how he was predicting deaths. I don't know what, like, do you know
I
the
don't think he was. He was just transmitting that like that's part of like the tradition. But yeah, I agree. But I think there are cases where like astrologers have helped law enforcement. Like there's the Friedland case from the 1930s where like a man went missing and his family was trying to find him, and the police actually came to an astrologer and were like, hey, can you help us find this guy? And they found him. So there I think there are definitely cases where like astrologers and diviners can work in concert with like authorities to do positive things in the world. That could be definitely be like a real thing. I would love if that was like more common. I don't really know of any other cases than that though.
Mhm.
um,
Yeah, I mean, I think what we would want to fight, right, is astrologers being oppressed. Like Laurel's saying, is like, whoever has the power gets to decide who gets imprisoned, and so I think there can be an oppression factor of astrologers as being, you know, uh, controlled erroneously, right? And that's really, I think, what we would want to fight.
yeah, well, and I think there's also a certain kind of like tendency, like a client can hear one thing that the astrologer didn't necessarily say. Like we all kind of have our own filters. And so I think like so a lot of astrologers I know like record their sessions so that like it's essentially for the client, so the client has access to, oh, like here's a cool record of your reading. But also it can be like a thing where like if a client comes back and says, oh, but you said such and such, you can say, well, actually, if you look at the recording. um yeah, it's tricky. It's like we're doing this kind of very specialized thing, and when it kind of interacts with the outside world, sometimes it's like it can be kind of unclear like what the ramifications are. Sometimes people can do have the best intentions, but some bad outcome comes about, and it's like nobody kind of foresaw that, like
Well, it's funny because ethics keep coming up in our discussion, and it's like I guess anytime we look at like people being incarcerated for a thing, I mean, it makes me think of like cases like Mumia Abdul Jabbar. Remember that case?
hmm. Well, yeah,
Uh,
yeah. He's been in prison for, yeah, for so long for something that was like I think it was pretty clear he didn't do it. It was and what's her name who just passed away? Asada Shakur. Like yeah, she went to prison for something that was demonstrably like she's part of the Black Panthers, and what she was accused of doing, of killing a cop, she definitely did not do. She wouldn't have been physically able to do at the time because she was pregnant, and it's like she spent 40, 50 years in exile in Cuba, like, and would have spent all that time in the US prison for nothing. It's like, oh my God. Yeah, there's definitely like abuses of the law. Yeah.
yeah, and I think that's where when I saw the top. topic for today, I was like, oh, that's kind of what we envision is like incarcerated for fortune telling. That's an abuse of the law, right? Like you,
Yeah.
one should not be incarcerated. Like the Salem witches should not have been burned, either.
Were any of those people actually witches? For the most part, it seems like if you look at the case, there was one man involved at the very beginning who might have been doing something that could be classified as witchcraft, but like all the women in that case were scapegoated. It seems like I'm not an expert on that, but maybe I got that wrong. But like,
Right.
yeah, I think for the most part, it's an exercise of power. Like
Let me ask
claiming, oh,
people. Let me ask people in the chat this: is there anything that an astrologer can do that you think would be worth incarceration? I mean,
please don't
Graham,
lock me up. I
what?
said, please don't lock me up. No,
Are you afraid of being locked up for
no,
doing?
no. No, I don't think I'm not on anybody's radar. But no. But yeah,
I'm
is
just
there anything? Yeah.
I do worry about like my schizophrenia side is always like, oh, the FBI is watching our show, and like people are like, oh, you're crazy, the FBI is not watching your show. And I was like, well, what about my friend from the FBI who came to visit me last year? And then people think I'm crazy, for that, but it's like the FBI did come to visit me. And that's the thing is, I think if you're anyone doing anything, the smart thing to think is the FBI is
People are
watching
watching.
me.
Well,
And
and these days with algorithms, yeah, you don't need a person watching. You just need like algorithmic triggers to be like, oh, so somebody said such and such a word in such and such a sequence that gets flagged, and then
well, and,
yeah,
and and that's the thing is like it's like okay, I think people think it's crazy to talk about the FBI because it starts to scare people. Like people who are listening now are probably scared. Oh no, the FBI is watching this show. Oh no, oh no, oh no. But I think
I'm
the
more worried
real
about ice right now. But yeah,
right, but the real problem that we're scared of is erroneous uses of power. There's no
yeah.
problem with the FBI watching our show as long as they act ethically and don't use an erroneous use of power against our show.
I don't know. There used to be a norm about like illegal wiretaps and things. I do feel like surveillance is uh ethically dubious. I don't think governments should be doing it. But the point is like they are doing it, right? Like we've kind of gone past that. That norm is definitely broken. Everyone kind of assumes their privacy is gone.
Mhm.
Yeah, I don't know.
Well, and Lolly's saying just the quote, just because you're paranoid doesn't mean they're not after you. I know it's
That's
like,
it.
no, that's the thing. And it's like, but what if the FBI, okay, let's flip the script here. What if the FBI wasn't watching us for nefarious purposes? What if, okay, I think astrology is as potent as to be able to be a remote viewer. Okay, like let's go back to the case of the domestic violence abuser. Now, I look into things called dermatomes, right? And it's like,
Hmm.
okay, so sorry if I'm scaring you, Graham. I've been
No, it's
at
fine. That's kind of outside of my what I know about, but that's okay.
okay, so we look into dermatomes. So we look at somebody, their electromagnetic structure and their flares and all this kind of stuff. So I think because I can see a domestic violence abuser's dermatome pathway from far away, like I can see from here if they're going to be flaring up thousands of miles away. I'm like, that's
Hmm.
as powerful as being a remote viewer, right? So what if
Yeah.
we would say that the FBI is watching us not for nefarious purposes, but because they're gathering data that will help them help the world. No,
I,
that's
I, I
that's idealistic, but I'm saying that's
well,
how I have to get unscared.
the thing I would say is that first of all, the CIA and other organizations are doing psi research. There's a great film out there, but it's based on a true story called "The Men Who Stare at Goats." That's about exactly that, about the U.S. government and military using remote viewers and people. But I think in all those cases, like they get the consent. You would hope that they would get the consent of all their participants. Like we're not consenting to anything right now.
I'm consenting. If the FBI wants to use my research to better the world and get, like help people with domestic violence, I'm consenting.
I That's great for you, Andy. I'm not sure I would consent to for any government organization to use my astrology, but that's okay. We can agree to differ on that.
Okay, 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 okay. I mean, this show topic is edgy. I mean, like, when I looked at it, I was thinking, oh gosh, that makes me a little nervous. But it's also like we have to talk candidly about these topics because we don't want people to oppress astrologers.
Yeah, but also I think we don't want to water down our astrology so much that it becomes, um, ineffective. Not, I don't know that that's necessarily what's happened, but I do think that like it's important to be bold, like with, if you have a prediction that you think will help the client and is backed up by the technique and, could be effective, like I think it's important to say it. It's important not to stifle ourselves for some kind of perceived sense of like, oh, the authorities might come down on me for that or something, like
Well, there's actually an ethic called duty to warn. Have you ever heard of it?
yeah, no, no, what's that about?
Well, okay, so people always think, "Oh, you're not a doctor, you shouldn't be giving medical advice." Well, I'm actually under an ethic called duty to warn, which is if somebody is dying or is ill and no one is helping them and I can see something in the astrological chart that might save their life, I have a duty to say something. That's actually
Yeah,
an ethic that because I could be saving a human life that would otherwise expire. I mean, a human life is worth millions of dollars. I think the number is $10 million is a human life, right?
sure,
Not to put
sure.
numbers on human lives, but I mean that's how important it is. So I think, we what if we should be arrested for not piping up
Yeah.
when we could be saving a life?
Yeah, I think especially on a like more person to person level, like if you had a friend who was struggling and you had some insight that you thought could help them, regardless of what other people think about, is that insight valid or not? Like I think it's important to share, like yeah, 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 when you get into like whose duty is to say what when, I don't know. I think about like oh God, like this is a silly example, but like the Seinfeld finale, like when they get sued for not intervening in something where had the duty to intervene. I forget how it went. Anyway, that was 30 years ago. But um, but yeah, like when are I don't know the legal ins and outs of like when are people required to get involved in helping others. I think as a practitioner, like we're for the most part we're just speaking to people one on one, and it's um, I think what astrology can do is really radical and valid. It's like it's this kind of knowledge base that the most of the world doesn't have access to, and it's like it's really cool that we can share our insights with it. Yeah, I don't know so much. Yeah, I think it's important to have in the back of your mind though, like, hey, there may be malign actors who might be listening in on especially like digital conversations. Yeah.
Well, and I
I don't
think there
know.
might be benevolent actors. I mean, that's the thing is, I think, really what's scary about the powers that be might be listening is that they might be mean and horrible. I mean, I think in the modern day we don't really see astrologers getting arrested. I haven't heard of a case in the modern day. I mean,
Right.
these are historical cases. I mean, it seems like the current way things are, being an astrologer is not illegal and it's
Right.
not. Now, Lolly's
The
saying,
culture could shift.
yeah, totally. I mean, I mean, but you know what? You have to get ready to go. I mean, I don't know. It's to the point where it's like you have to be brave, like faith over fear. Like you have to be brave to do whatever you're doing. If you're
Yeah.
doing anything that's worth anything, I mean, you have to be a little
Yeah.
bit
I think
brave.
that's true.
Um,
Yeah.
but so catch you saying, I don't believe there are actions that astrologers could do as astrologers that would necessarily be illegal, but as people, astrologers can do unethical and illegal things.
Certainly. I agree with that. Yeah. Yeah. I think it when it comes to issues of legality, I think like I think astrologers should protect themselves from the law and not get arrested for, but in terms of ethics and personal ethics with clients and things, like I think that definitely needs to be a conversation that we have. Yeah, for sure.
Well, like, okay, when I say medical things, I always say the disclaimer: I am not a doctor. I'm not a qualified doctor. I'm an astrologer, and I am saying this. Like, I do that diligently because if anyone is watching the powers that be, I want them to know that I care and that I am doing my due diligence to let people know. You know what I'm saying? It's like we got to do our due diligence
But
ethically.
see, Andy, I feel like that message is totally historically contingent. That you wouldn't even have that thought that you would need to do that unless there had been precedent for people getting locked up for according to the law, spurious medical claims, and it's like, yeah, we're living in a post kind of like a post-Victorian world where like, like rationalism and science are like the only kind of validated forms of knowledge when it's just not the case. It's like culture is weirder and wilder and more interesting than that.
Totally. Like my schizophrenic mind, I'm like, yeah, the FBI loves my show, and I'm like totally psyops, and I'm like psyops for humanity being better. Like I have to fight the fears with like utopian like delusions of everything's okay because I get scared too. But
I feel,
it's
I
like
mean,
go ahead.
oh, I feel like you have this image of like a Dale Cooper, like the altruistic FBI agent.
Well,
I don't
otherwise
know.
I would live in fear. I mean, it comes down to the panopticon of like, you know what the panopticon is?
Sure. Yes. Yeah. Bentham. Yep.
It's the idea that we're being looked at from all sides, and that there's certain prisons that work in the panopticon structure where they watch prisoners from all sides. And when you work on in TV, you are in the panopticon because
Yeah.
we don't know who's watching this. I mean, I bet this episode will get maybe 200 views. That's 200 people seeing it. We don't know who those 200 views are. So you are living in the panopticon when you produce live TV, and so there has to be some like getting used to that utopian ideal of like the people who are watching are benevolent and this kind of thing, and like it's a way to strengthen the muscle of like being in show business, you know what I mean, kind of thing. um
Yeah.
it I mean, I have to think people are benevolent or else I wouldn't even go out to dinner at night. Like, I mean, I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. I tend to think there's. I think most people are have good intentions, but not everybody. you know. Uh,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, okay, so let's change the subject to something less scary, which is uh, Laurel's wondering how often the powers that be employ fortune tellers like psychics and astrologers. Like, do you think that the
I think it happens more than we think. There have definitely been court cases where people have used psychics, and that's kind of outside the realm of like what I feel confident like knowing or talking about. But yeah, especially like that Friedland case where they found the guy who was missing. You know, uh, I think it's definitely a possibility. Like I think it's very contingent on like what country you're in and like how that goes down, but it could happen. Yeah.
well, didn't I mean Ronald Reagan had an astrologer, right?
That's right, Joan Quigley. Yeah, yeah. They apparently. I just watched a fascinating Ryan Butler. By the way, if anyone doesn't know Ryan Butler's channel, he had a really good episode on this, like how Joan Quigley would essentially use like Vorti Course Moon stuff to like coordinate Reagan's meetings where like he didn't want the thing to succeed. It was like because it was because she was only given like kind of down to the minute, like you can adjust by like 15 minutes here or there. But so apparently like Vorti Course Moon was like the main thing.
Oh, that's so fascinating.
Isn't
That
that weird? Yeah.
well, I mean, you don't think DT has an astrologer?
Who?
DT.
Oh, Donald Trump. Yeah. I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, I don't know that he would have the attention span to listen to them, but maybe I could see
Well,
it. I think a lot of rich people do, and they don't say it. It's like,
yeah, that's what I think too. It's like they must have an astrologer on their team, even if they don't talk about it because it's not really in brand, for them. That's not their brand. Their brand is Republican. Their brand is, we don't do that stuff. But I think they would be remiss to not have somebody talking to them about the celestial forces. Like, if you look at it
yeah.
scientifically, that would be like not having an astronomer on your team or not having a geographer on your team.
Absolutely. Well, and I think a lot of times about like what about like labor unions or like political action committees that are like could definitely use help in terms of timing for events and things like or even especially for candidates around elections. Like it may yeah, not astrological elections, political elections, but you could imagine them using an astrologer in a way that would be actually be very helpful. Now, I don't know. Like that would be entering like into the world of the kind of like cut and thrust of politics that like that might be kind of dangerous for astrology as like a thing if that became like normalized. But I definitely think there are like different groups in society that could definitely use the benefit of astrologers. Like, yeah,
Yeah, so Laurel's saying that DT's actions coincide perfectly with transits. Like maybe that's just them naturally acting them out, or it's intentional. Well, and I will also say, Laurel, that
He has that Regulus.
the
Yeah.
actions of the people coincide with the transits too, because astrologers are everywhere. Like you can Google the Saturn Neptune conjunction or the Mars Pluto conjunction. You can Google that everywhere. So the
Yeah.
society as a whole, we could even say that the politicians or the FBI isn't actually in charge anymore because Google is in charge. Like
Oh, for
that
sure.
ubiquitous
Amazon.
people are in charge in some ways, and it's so the people knowing the transits and protesting on them then makes the government act in response to the transit. It's like a what chicken or egg effect.
Yeah, I definitely do think like people do play out their charts without if they even if they don't know a lick of astrology, like they will just their actions do play out the things that are going on in their chart and you can see it, And so it's like I do wonder like where is Minneapolis in Trump's chart? Like why does he keep going back to that one city? It's like what's that about? I don't know. Uh,
Yeah, I was asking my mom about that. She lives in Minnesota and she was a mayor for many years. And she was saying that he's mad at Minnesota because they didn't vote for him. And that there's like some other reason he's like mad at
yeah.
Minnesota. But
Well,
um,
and George Floyd, that shooting happened very close to like the recent goings on there. It seems like yeah.
mhm, yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know.
I'll tell you something about being locked up though. So I
Sure.
got locked up for schizophrenia for a month, and I built my own ephemeris in there. And I was
Oh wow.
reading the chart of my mate in there, and then I had recreated all the charts of everyone on my team because in order to get out of the hospital, I had to like talk to everyone on the phone, and I was like watching all their transits because they couldn't agree on it, what to do with me and all this stuff. And I was like watching all their transits, and it's like I will tell you that you can put the astrologer in the silent room and you cannot take the astrologer out of there. And you know 'cause it's
Absolutely. Well, and it's funny you mentioned that. I'm doing a course actually coming up this week on how to calculate your chart by hand, and it's all about using the ephemeris and like getting into your transits, and um, that's fascinating, Andy. Like, how did you? Wow, you didn't need any like reference material to like make all that? How did you do that?
I just no I knew all the charts by my head, but as far as the ephemeris, like I went down and I did everything that I knew, like like I like
Yeah.
Pluto was in Libra in 1977 when I was born, and like Pluto, like everyone whose chart I knew, I like kind of like reconstructed, so I was able
Oh.
to, but I couldn't see out the window, so I couldn't see stuff, and so I was limited on like how much transit information I could get. But yeah, like you can't take the astrology. You'll take yourself with you in there, and then you'll be doing the charts of all the people in the prison. So that's the thing is they can't
I'm
kill.
so impressed. Like I wouldn't even know where to start with that. But yeah, I guess you could see that probably like changed a lot of your kind of like how did were you just like watching the sun? Like how would you? Oh my gosh.
Yeah, well, we spend the last 2 minutes talking to people how they can find you and work with you. But
Oh sure.
they wouldn't give me an ephemeris. They wouldn't give me anything. No, but I like I'm saying that your spirit will prevail no matter what happens. Okay, Graham.
Yeah.
Okay, tell
Oh
us how people can find you. What about your course? Where is it? All that stuff.
oh sure. Yeah. Right now, my main thing is I'm on Instagram. I'm at it's at astrologram, spelled like my name, Graham. And this week on Sunday night at 6 at Multnomah Friends meeting, I'm giving a workshop on how to calculate your birth chart by hand. It's going to be a three sessions, so 3 Sundays, and yeah, we're going to get into like the kind of the math of like how do you actually use the ephemeris to get to your birth chart, and yeah, I think it'll be a bit of an adventure. Yeah, so
That's the location for that.
oh, it's at this place called Multnomah Friends Meeting. It's on Stark and 43rd Street.
Oh, it's the Friends Center. Okay.
Yeah.
Um. Okay. Well. Um. Multnomah Friends Center. So you can contact them for class info.
Hmm.
All right. So we're gonna have Graham back every month, once a month, because we just love Graham. I hope I didn't scare you, Graham.
No, this is great.
Okay. Okay. I'm not scared. I think we'll have a joyous evening of dinners, and if anyone saw this, they will love it. All right. Thank you all for being here in the chat. Thank you, Graham. This is a great edgy topic. You didn't scare me, but who knows? All right. We will see you
Thanks,
next month,
Andy.
Graham. All right. Take
Yes,
care.
soon.
Bye.